Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in. This is it. It's another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud. Hey, I'm David Summers. This is the story of wrestling in America as told by the Stud, whose family started the profession 100 years ago. So now we step back into the ring, back into time. Let's get wall-to-wall, treetop tall with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, where the weather's starting to get right. Is it, Ron?
Oh, man. Fantastic. Jeez, we're sitting. Our fall is here, man. And thinking back, all those years in Florida, I remembered when living in Tennessee, usually about the first week in September, you got that first little front that came through and kind of dropped everything. So we're in the 50s at night, and 70s during the day, and wow, can't complain about that. Sure.
That's awesome. We've had a 59-degree morning, a couple of 60, 61 degrees like this morning, I think. It was awesome, really good first thing in the morning. But noontime comes and it just kind of slaps you around. So that's just how it is in South Alabama. Hey, but we'll take what we can give for now. We know we got some more warm days coming, but we're looking forward to fall. And listen, more great response from the fans, Ron, with a new all-time Studcast record indicates their overwhelming interest in what was happening to you in 1979's Southeastern Wrestling, really in both territories. Last week's Studcast number 316 had great cards in both territories, but still no end to the Knoxville War, and you were back on the road again. In the Southeastern Gulf Coast, you were booking, wrestling, you were taking care of business every night.
Yeah, well, it was apparent, Dave. The Knoxville War wasn't going to go away easily, obviously, and the talent situation with just my taking over again as a booker down in the Gulf Coast territory was, if anything, man, making my life more complicated every day. You know, I turned probably the greatest heel in the first 5 years of Southeastern history, the Mongolian Stomper babyface.
And listen, that was kind of a huge gamble. I think you would agree. So your title for this Studcast, number 317, this is number 317, Tennessee Stomper versus Ox, Gulf Coast, impress me. It covers that perfectly, it seems like. So I don't know how you managed to survive 1979 up to this point, Stud. Every new episode leaves us wondering how much more you were actually going to be able to take.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, luckily I still had some very good talent in both territories, especially in the Tennessee territory. And the card there for this Studcast was as good, basically, as any territory in the country, man. We had some good guys in the ring. And as a new booker, I was scrambling to try to make something like that, something big happen down in the Southeastern Gulf Coast as well during this point. And this Studcast is going to have a unique angle down there that, to my knowledge, had never been done before. So I was totally consumed by all of this, man, especially being down in the South again and what was happening to me. And I was just determined, man, to do something to change my future. And basically the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be in this and down there in the Gulf Coast for 2 straight weeks.
So it really sounds like you were starting to reach a turning point in Southeastern's future. I can't wait to hear this unique angle you just mentioned. So where do we ride today? Where do we get this thing started? Which territory, Stud?
We're going to begin, I think, with another very strong card in Knoxville. In the last week of September 1979, Andre the Giant visited us there in the last Studcast, and boy, he thrilled Tennessee fans as always, everywhere he went. Before, at the end of it, though, having to be helped from the Coliseum ring after Ox Baker hit him with a heart punch. So I'll cover this week's card, the TV promoting it, the results of the card, and the attendance. And in addition to that, I'll also give everybody the competing card for All-Star Wrestling, which I've been doing the last 2 or 3 Studcasts. They've moved in this one to a different venue for their matches, and some more of their sport-killing tactics is going to be going on. Then we'll ride south to the Gulf Coast, where I was going to be staying, like I said, for the next 2 weeks. And it'll also has some really good card there, and with that crazy angle, and all 3 of the major cities down there are going to get the same card as usual. I'll cover the TV, promotes that card, the results of the matches, and the attendances in those cities down there. Then if we have enough time, Dave, hopefully we'll get in a learning tree question.
All right, so it sounds like obviously another loaded Studcast, Ron. It's going to begin in Tennessee, take us south to the Gulf Coast, and fill us with all kinds of information on the ride. So, okay, so who was on the Knoxville Coliseum card Friday, September 28th, 1979?
Well, it opened up with Tony Charles against Redbeard. It was a guy named Doug Gilbert. Then it had Dean Ho and Wayne Rogers wrestling against Norvell Austin and the Angel, who was Frank Morrell, pretty well recognized as a decent worker around the country. Then they had the steadily improving Paul Orndorff facing Gorgeous George Jr.'s Russian Alexis Smirnoff. In a special event, after Golden and Austin had basically successfully defended their tag belts against Rob and I the week before, they refused, obviously, to defend against us again until they were going to have to be forced to, basically, the way they put it. So Robert then challenged Jimmy Golden, who were both beginning at this point to grow some hair back to a single match. Then in the Southeastern Championship match, champion Dick Slater was going to be defending against Tora Tanaka, who was returning from the Gulf Coast, where he'd been the week before, and he was managed by Gorgeous George Jr. naturally. And then the main event was a $5,000 bounty match. This one was no time limit, no DQ, and this, for the first time ever, the Mongolian Stomper was going to be in a single match against the dangerous Ox Baker, managed by Gorgeous George Jr.
Wow. Okay, that's a great card right there. I'm thinking that Robert and Jimmy probably looked like young men headed to the military, maybe. That's just my guess.
Yeah, they were getting about there. The hair was real short, I'd have to say.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so what was on the TV setting this whole card up? What was that like?
Well, let's open the show with Dick Slater and Paul Orndorff at the set with him, and he welcomed them, and he told them that in his estimation, they had the night before one of the best Southeastern Championship matches he had ever seen. So they watched the last 3 minutes of that. That match ended up in a 30-minute time limit draw for the belt, for the championship belt, Slater against Orndorff, 2 baby faces. And so it showed the last 3 minutes of that match, and during that, that 3 minutes, both guys were complimentary of each other. These guys liked each other. They were both from that area. And the action in the ring basically spoke for itself. I mean, Coliseum crowd was going crazy, and both of the wrestlers were just refusing to be pinned, man. Bunch of false finishes, and it finally ended with the bell, but no winner in the ring. So there was a winner, though, and that was the entire Coliseum, which at the end of this, they get a big pan to shot of the crowd. Everybody in the building was on their feet giving them a standing ovation. So I wasn't there for this TV. I was down south because I was handling the Gulf Coast territory at this point, booking and everything. So Les told me he got chill bumps just watching the video. He said it was one of those moments that made you proud to be a wrestler. And I know what he's talking about. There are some matches that just make you go, wow, this is what a great business to be in. So they ended up this match shaking each other's hand again. They ended up this segment with Les at the set shaking each other's hand again. And then Orndorff even wished Slater luck in his upcoming title match with Tora Tanaka. And then Orndorff went to the ring for the first TV match of the day. Slater thanked Les as he was leaving the set, and Les reminded him that he was going to be on the last match of the show. Paul Orndorff was being announced in the ring when uninvited, naturally, Gorgeous George Jr. brought Alexis Smirnoff and Tora Tanaka to the set with Les. And as Orndorff was displaying his skills in the ring, which at this point were coming pretty prolific, Gigi ridiculed Les and Slater and Orndorff for the way they had opened this wrestling show with a horrible example of the sport as they had what they had just watched. And he continued his criticism. He described Paul Orndorff as a simple-minded musclehead that had a hard time just finding his way to the ring. and he said, when my Russian Alexis Smirnoff finishes with him next Friday night, he says he's going to have an even harder time finding his way back to the dressing room. So, Gigi and his two men, they had a big laugh about that one, obviously. But Les wasn't so amused at the comment. And he told Gigi and his men, they should leave the set. He said, because you weren't invited. You're not supposed to even be out here. So Gigi, said he only came out because he wanted to make sure Les has gotten the video that he and Ox Baker had shot the night before in the Coliseum after the match that Ox Baker had hit Andre with the heart punch. So he wanted to make sure that you were going to show it. So Les said, basically, okay, I've had enough of it, and then he said, and the way Gigi described the incident, he said Ox Baker almost killed Andre the Giant last night. And Les didn't like those type of comments about killing wrestlers, man. That was too much. So he basically demanded they leave the set immediately. And at the same time, Orndorff, he hit his opponent in the ring with one of those football tackle finishes, man. And so Gigi left saying basically, we'll be back. And I think he was going to get a dose of Gigi probably in this TV. And it didn't get much better for Les. He was interrupted again. The second segment was set to open up with Robert. But instead, out comes Jimmy Golden and Norvell Austin. They got their Southeastern belts and they strut out to the set. And they wanted to brag about their second time in a row win over the Fuller Punks the night before. And they let everybody know that they had no more championship matches with us, planned with us in the future. And if we wrestled again, it'd be only in single matches from there on out. So Les told them, this time had been set aside for Robert to watch how they stole the victory, the way Les put it. We want to watch, he's going to watch how you guys stole the victory last night from the Fullers. So Golden got very upset with the word stole, and he refused, the opportunity from Les to watch into the tag match. Les said, okay, well, sit here then, and you can watch and see, and you see it for yourself. So he did say, though, Jimmy said, that Robert Fuller challenged him to a single match next Friday. He had already signed a contract for it, and he was looking for it. And they immediately then got up and left the set to obviously a roar of boos from the crowd. And then Robert quickly joined Les, and he watched how Golden had used an object on him the night before that basically knocked him out. And because of that, Jimmy and Norvell got their win in the tag team match. But now, 1 against 1, Rob was saying, was the way it was going to be next Friday night. Then he went to the ring, and he got another win with a Fuller leg lock.
How about that? All right, so a lot had happened in the first two segments, Stud. So you're up to the personality profile by now. So what happened there?
Well, it was being done live in front of the studio audience. The guest was the Mongolian Stomper. He was welcomed, obviously, with a big round of cheers. He was really over at this point. Fans loved him. Les started out the profile with a short video of Ox Baker getting Andre the Giant alone at the end of that bounty match in the Coliseum from the night before and hitting him with his controversial hard punch. The studio reacted when they saw the hard punch. I mean, it was a nasty looking thing. Whenever he did that, it looked as bad or worse than it was, maybe, And so the studio crowd watched it, and they even reacted to it as the fans had in the building that night. There was a big gasp of air when he hit him with that hard punch. So the Stomper, he thanked Andre, for coming from Canada, to be his partner. He said it was really nice of Andre to step up and come down to Tennessee to be his partner, and he apologized for getting him involved in it and almost hurt badly. He said he was able to go home, and he was feeling okay the next day. He saw him, but he was really upset that he had even brought him down. And that, this bounty situation at this point was all his, he thought. From here on out, he wasn't going to have any partners anymore. He wasn't going to do tag matches. So if anybody got hurt, it was going to be him that got hurt. And he said, but that ain't going to happen. So Les said he was glad to hear that. But he warned the Stomper he had a video to show him now. And he said, this video was shot last night in the Coliseum with Gorgeous George Jr. and Ox Baker. And he said, I got to tell you, Archie, he called him Archie because that was his real name. He said, I got to tell you, Archie, this video really concerns me, man, and you need to see it before we go any further here. So the studio went silent. It was set up pretty good. And so it started immediately after Ox Baker and Alexis Smirnoff had got back in the dressing room after the bounty match, where Ox had hit Andre with the hard punch right at the end of the deal. And the two of them were basically kind of celebrating, man. They thought that they had maybe done a heck of a lot of damage maybe to Andre. That would have made a big name, big impression on the rest of the sport if the word got around. Ox Baker almost killed Andre with his hard punch.
No doubt.
That's what they were, so excited about.
Yeah.
And Gigi, in listening to those guys, he got very excited too about the time they were going to do the interview. So Gigi began the interview. He was patting them on the back, and they were patting him on the back, and so Ox and him, he talked about, oh boy, that was great. You hit Andre with the hard punch, Ox, and he said instead of Andre, he goes, then this bounty stuff would be all over if you had hit instead of Andre, Stomper. He goes, you hit the wrong guy, right? And he said, that Stomper would have been right now in the ambulance going to the hospital, and you guys, you'd have been in the money, So that now, he said he saw that, what he needed to do. He said, now I see what I need to do. He said, what I need to do, Les. And Les was handling the interview. He said, what I need to do, Les, is double the bounty money. I need to double it from $5,000 to $10,000. And he said, and that'll definitely get the job done. And he said, Stomper being out of wrestling right now, that will get Stomper out of the sport right now and forever. So Ox Baker, now the focus was all on Gigi during the course of this interview. Ox and Alexis are kind of in the background, but Ox then suddenly appears on the camera shot. And he's got a big smile and on his face, and he's pounding his taped fist, which he always taped that right hand, and he's pounding that taped fist into his hand, and he asked to Gigi. He interrupts Gigi, and he says, "Did I hear you right?" He said, "Are you doubling the money? You doubling the bounty from 5,000 to 10,000?" He goes, "I want to be the first to get the money, man." And he says, and I want to let the rest of the world know I'm the man for the job, And he said, "You got to bring me back next Friday night, just me against the Stomper." And he said, "I guarantee you my man, you will be leaving here a short $10,000, and the Stomper will be leaving here feet first. So all you could hear after that was Gigi. Gigi went crazy, and he was saying, yes, $10,000, Ox. And then Ox, man, he shoved this big, huge fist right in front of the camera. It took up almost the entire screen. People were watching this at home, and the people in the studio. All you could see basically was his fist, and all you could hear behind him was Gorgeous George Jr. He said, "Get ready, Stomper. The end is coming."
That was about as scary an interview as I've ever heard, Stud. It sounds like things were getting real nasty there, Ron. So how did their Stomper respond to all of that?
Well, Les said Stomper was very concerned. I wasn't there that day, being down on the Gulf Coast. But Les said the Stomper was very concerned. He wasn't happy to hear the bounty money was doubled. He said he knew Gigi wanted him out of wrestling. He knew that Gigi had enough money to make it happen. And no one in the sport had a better reputation for being able to put him out of wrestling probably than Ox Baker. But then he had his own line for Gigi at the end, and he says, but no matter what, he said, who the wrestlers were coming after him now, he said, I would die before losing my chosen profession.
Wow. Okay. So that was a dead serious profile from both sides, really. It sounds like this upcoming bounty match between Ox Baker and the Mongolian Stomper was going to be as violent as it comes. So how do you follow that profile, Ron?
Well, you follow it basically with another deadly serious wrestler, who was Tora Tanaka, man, and he had always been that type of wrestler. And he was about to face off against the Southeastern champion the next Friday night, Dick Slater, for the title. And Gorgeous George Jr. Really couldn't wait to get to the set with Les while, he put his monster in the ring. And then he just basically ran to the set. He had so much to say after the end of that profile. And so he raced to the set, and the Japanese monster, he was just destroying his opponent. I mean, wow. So Gigi was absolutely gushing with confidence, He was saying, yeah, I made the right decision, the bounty money. He said, it's going to be paid. I'm willing to pay the $10,000, and it's going to happen 6 days from now, Les. This is great. I'm going to get rid of the Mongolian Stomper. So, then in the last TV match was Dick Slater. And that personality profile, man, it just kind of changed everybody's attitude. You could see it in the way that Tanaka had wrestled, and you could see it in the way Slater went about taking care of his opponent. Wow, he was nasty big time. And so, he was basically as vicious as Tanaka.
Wow.
As vicious as Tanaka was. It was a very, very serious program.
It was a very intense TV show, obviously. So what happened the following night after all this buildup in the Coliseum?
Well, Tony Charles beat Redbeard, Doug Gilbert, and then the only tag match on the card, Norvell Austin, who was partnering with the Angel, Frank Morrell, he pinned Wayne Rogers, whose partner was the Hawaiian Dean Ho. And so Paul Orndorff and Alexis Smirnoff, who was managed by Gigi, wrestled to a 20-minute time limit draw. Good match, but nothing like the match that Orndorff had with Slater, because Smirnoff wasn't, he wasn't that good a technician in the ring. He was more of a pounder and what you would expect one of Gorgeous George Jr.'s guys to be like. Robert and Jimmy were both disqualified. They both started bleeding. It was a nasty match, man. Things were kind of heating back up between Rob and Jimmy. Then Dick Slater successfully defended his Southeastern belt against Tora Tanaka. And the following week, Dick Slater was going to be facing the second famous star. After Andre had appeared the week before, we got another big star coming in the Southeastern that's going to be taking on Dick Slater. And that's going to be the former NWA World Champion, Jack Brisco. Then in the $10,000 bounty match, Ox Baker didn't fare nearly as well as he expected he would. Mongolian Stomper actually beat him in the middle of the ring, and then got his hand raised on Gorgeous George, but it wasn't for long. After he beat Baker, he was actually able to get his hands on Gorgeous George, but Alexis Smirnoff found a chair, man, right there by where they were, and that chair found the top of the Mongol's head, man. He got crowned. Alexis crowned him with a chair, and blood was running off of both sides of his head, man, his bald head, and Stomper was basically carried from the ring at the end of it.
Wow.
So Les said, that kind of left the crowd wondering, was the bounty paid? Who got the money there if Stompers are out of it?
Yeah, so obviously the crowd was wondering about that, but it really sounds like a wild and bloody night. So how about attendance? How did you guys do on that night?
Well, it was down 500 fans from the week before that had Andre the Giant, which was to be expected. I mean, he's a superstar. And so it was down from 4,200 to 3,700.
Juxtaposed to the All-Star event, how did they do?
Well, they were no longer in the baseball stadium, but they weren't going back to Chilhowee Park either. They had moved their matches to a high school gym, Fulton High School gym in Knoxville, which was a bad sign for them that they were not growing their crowds. And now it was obvious that they were looking for a cheaper venue so that they could keep coming back to Knoxville and keep operating. So this card was headlined by, again, Ginger the Wrestling Bear. And again, she was supposed to be wrestling fans from the crowd. After that, after their card with the so-called Southeastern Championship, Tag Championship match, I got an attorney. And I threatened to sue them, and so if they continued to use the Southeastern name. So this was the last time they went ahead and used it again because they had agreed that they would stop using it, but they went ahead and used this again as the Southeastern Tag Championship match. But it was the last time that was ever going to happen. It was Bob Orton Jr. and Barry Orton versus Terry Gibbs and Ronnie Garvin. And I don't know exactly who won. I never asked the guy that looked at the crowds for me who won. I really didn't care. Bob Roop wrestled Macho Man, Randy Savage. Boris Malenko faced Lanny Poffo. And there were two other matches on the card, but I don't know who was in those matches. Then they had another one of those ridiculous challenge of the week. This was a $5,000 baby bottle challenge, it was called. Dick Slater was going to get $5,000 if he showed up at the event and could beat Bob Roop.
Oh, my God. All right, so let me see if I got this right. The Bear, again, was going to wrestle fans from the crowd. They were advertising for the last time a Southeastern Tag Championship match, even though they had no belts. And their company was called All-Star Wrestling. All right, so, and then they had a baby bottle challenge match. Dick Slater could get $5,000 if he showed up at their matches and beat Bob Roop.
Kind of a sad joke, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, and if you think about it, if no one challenged the Bear, it would be the second week in a row where a bear was booked to wrestle, and they didn't even have a bear match.
So you just walk him out to the ring, and that's
walk him out to the ring, and
it's a bear
give him
show.
the Coke bottle, and then take him back to the dressing room.
So
right?
they all saw the bear, yeah.
So it was the kind of thing that hurt the legitimacy of the sport, man, in both companies. It kind of rolled over to us too, the way they were handling business. It was not a good deal. Basically, they were making a mockery of the sport and having no second thoughts about it. They didn't care. It was easy for them. But since, they never paid a penny to anyone for the rights to have these matches to begin with. And, Unlike me, who had paid $150,000 for the privilege of promoting wrestling in Knoxville, they paid nothing. They decided they wanted to take it. So our crowds were down more than 25% since the war started. Their crowds were averaging less than 700 per event. And on this night, because they moved into a high school gym, it was a new facility, new place, they had less than 500 fans. So our Knoxville fans alone were down more than 1,500 fans a week. And that figure was constantly getting worse. So all of this was the horrible cost, man, of a wrestling war.
Well, really amazing figures, Stud, especially sad since you worked so hard for so long to build the sport. A great first part of this ride, Ron, no doubt, on this Studcast. So when we come back, we're at the break. We'll do the break now, and we'll find out more about that unique angle that you mentioned earlier as we head south and get into the Gulf Coast. So this Studcast will continue in a moment. The Tennessee Stud has done it again. His Ask the Stud #9 question and answer show has set a new first week out record downloads for these extremely popular programs. The only place you can find them is YouTube, Southeastern Rewind. This new one has some of the best questions yet. No one is better at explaining almost everything that fans don't know about the sport than the man that did it all in the sport, the Tennessee Stud. Take your ride into wrestling history at YouTube, Southeastern Rewind, today. All right, Studcast fans, welcome back in. Another Studcast that is really going to catch a lot of attention. All right, so Ron, do you want to start the last part of this Studcast with the Mobile, Alabama card? You were in Expo Hall. It was Wednesday, September 26th, 1979.
Yeah, it works, Dave. I mean, we normally kind of start off with the card. So Mobile, I called it the Magic City, man. When it came to wrestling, it had basically been that since 1954 when my dad took me and Rob and the family south from Kingsport, Tennessee to Mobile, Alabama. And he opened the first wrestling territory on the Gulf Coast. And it was also one of the rare southern cities to have two buildings on the same site. Very few cities had that. You know, it had the Expo Hall, which held about 4,000. And if you pushed it and you needed to and you set it up, you could put almost 5,000 in there. And right next to the building, I mean, within, 200 feet, was a municipal auditorium that held 10,000 or more. Almost basically twice the capacity of the Knoxville Coliseum. Big building there. So on this night, we're in the smaller Expo Hall. And the opening match was Roy Lee Welch against the Inferno. Then there was a newcomer named Vince Violetti, who was brought in by the former booker, Louis Tillett. And Vince was making his first appearance in the Gulf Coast. He was going to be wrestling against Eddie Mansfield. Then a young, fired-up Kevin Sullivan, man, who was so happy down there on the beach in that part of the country. He was like, he was really... He couldn't believe how lucky he was. Kept saying, Ron, I'm just so lucky to be here. Thank you so much. And he was going to be making his second appearance in Mobile, and he was going to be wrestling against the Hunter, Rock Hunter, who was a wrestler from Atlanta, Georgia. I was going to be facing Ox Baker for the second week in a row. There'd been no winner in the first match we had, stopped by double disqualification. This time, it was a no disqualification match. Austin Idol had sent the Gladiator packing the week before in the loser leaves Southeastern match. This time he was defending again against an unknown mass wrestler, a guy that would call himself Mr. Pensacola. And the main event was a very unusual best 2 out of 3 fall tag team match. You didn't see those type of matches very often anymore. And this was for the Southeastern belts. And the newly crowned champions, Jerry Stubbs and Mike Stallings, were defending for the second time on this card against the former champions, the Assassins.
Wow. All right. A terrific card in the Southeastern Gulf Coast territory. I want to ask you about the TV show coming up, but I want to see if you will compare just for a moment, because you're known to keep wrestlers happy, like you were just talking about Kevin Sullivan, coming to you numerous times to say thank you for letting me be a part of this organization, versus the all-star team that were trying to put on shows, and the amount of money they were probably making or not making versus your guys had to be a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we just talked about the card there in Knoxville where they changed to the high school gym.
Yeah.
They had less than 500 people.
Yeah.
Well, the average ticket price was probably $4.
Yeah.
So they had $2,000 to pay the school, to pay the police, to pay the wrestlers, to pay the announcers, to pay the referees, to pay the people to set up the ring. I mean, the expenses were very, very bad. Yeah. So how much do you think they could pay those guys on the $2,000 gross house? I mean, no wonder Kevin was happy.
Yeah.
He had been in Knoxville. He had gotten some very good payoffs. Mm-hmm. And Kevin was kind of a funny guy. Sometimes I think he was more happy to be living on the beach than he was living in the mountains.
Right, exactly.
So, when he said, I got to thank you for having me here, man, for letting me work here. I don't know that it was just the money he was so because that boy got brown. He spent time on the beach, let me tell you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's lifestyle can be everything in some situations. So I don't get how those guys are feeling now and how they were paying bills, family concerns, anything like that. So anyway, that's what amazes me, that they did what they did, and I wonder what they felt about it now. So, all right. So on to the TV show that promoted this card.
Well, for the first time in months, man, I was in the studio, WTVY television studio, just outside of Dothan, Alabama, and handling the TV. And basically, Louis Tillett at this point was gone. He was still living in Dothan, but he didn't even come to this TV. So this particular TV was going to push the boundaries, man, of a loser leave match. I had an angle that I was going to do this day. To my knowledge, it had never been done before. Charlie Platt opened the TV show with the Southeastern champion, Austin Idol, at the set, and they watched the video that showed how he beat the Gladiator and ran him out of the Southeastern wrestling. And it was an extremely controversial victory. I mean, it wasn't. It was really. He screwed him, I guess, is about all you can say. It really, it was not a very solid victory. So Idol was extremely bold, man. And then Charlie kind of brought that up when he saw the end of the match, and he goes, "Wow, that's horrible." And Idol says that he disputed. He said, "Who cares if it's a disputed victory?" And he said, "I finally got rid of it." He said, of a very sorry wrestler. That's the way he described him, man. And he said, he's so sorry. He said he's so bad that he had to wear a mask because he was embarrassed about his lack of wrestling ability in the ring. That's why he wore a mask, right? So Charlie, and everybody liked the Gladiator, who was Dick Steinborn, So Charlie kind of stood up for the Gladiator. And his skills, and the fact that fans were very upset about the way Idol had manipulated the match. I think the way Charlie put it, the way you manipulated this win to get rid of this guy in such a despicable manner. He says, I'll tell you what, he goes, Southeastern Commissioner Don Curtis has seen this, and he's pretty upset, too, with how you won this match. So Idol just started laughing. He goes, I love the controversy. He goes, this is wonderful. He's gone. I beat him. He's out of here. And he goes, I don't mind controversy. And then he continued his rant about how happy he was. He says, I finally got rid of the gladiator. So what? He goes, he was horrible anyway, and he said, and then the fans going to be happy to never see him again. And you said, and the fact he's gone, well, good riddance, And then he changed the subject to the new masked man. He saw who he was wrestling, and he goes, he asked him, he said, the New Southeastern, he said, and now I just got rid of a masked man, and he goes, here's another one. Now Don Curtis is making me defend against another masked man. And he goes, and this guy, Charlie goes, this guy's named after a city. And he goes, an ugly city at that. He says, now I'm going to have to defend against a masked guy called Mr. Pensacola for my belt. And he said, so he asked Charlie, he says, by any chance, can you tell me, Charlie, he said, did this Mr. Pensacola get his name by maybe winning a beauty contest? And he laughed. They had another big laugh. So Charlie, Charlie had something that was going to turn the tables on Idol big time. And Charlie just kind of smiled at this little last comment, and he told Idol, he said, basically, Austin Idol, he said, I'm through with you. And he said, you might want to watch the last match on today's card. That's the way they ended the first segment of the show. So Idol, being a cocky Idol, he said something like, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Charlie Platt. And he said, I might add, the pleasure is all yours.
Well, of course.
And he threw his belt over his shoulder and he strutted for the ring. He was in the first match of the day.
It doesn't sound like he was too full of himself, does it? Much? Okay, so how did he do in the match?
Well, he was on fire, he'd had this long segment with Charlie, and he'd watch this match, and he'd got to say everything he wanted to say. Everybody's mad and upset with him. That's what Idol was all about. This was great, So he went in the ring, and he was more cocky than I'd ever seen him, man. He had no pity on this. And then, obviously, Idol was a pretty big dude. He had a much smaller opponent, and he was obviously really enjoying whipping this young boy's butt, right? And the guy's writhing in pain, put the figure four on him, and he didn't want to let it loose. I mean, he got himself a lot more heat. Second match was Jerry Stubbs, Mike Stallings. That was the Southeastern. They were champions, the Southeastern Tag Champions. They entered the ring. They had the belts on. They're going to be wrestling against Eddie Mansfield and the Hunter, Rock Hunter. Now, that was an unusually strong team for a TV match against television champions. And the Assassins came and sat with Charlie at the set to watch this match. And they laid out the reason for their upcoming best 2 out of 3 fall championship match against Stubbs and Stallings. And they had good points about it. They didn't have those type of matches anymore. They felt like they were in better shape than those two guys, and they were going to win their belts back. And as that conversation proceeded, well, so did the match with Stubbs and Stallings, man, and they were firing up that studio, man. And it was a long tag match, which fit perfectly with the conversation about having a 2 out of 3 fall match. And so, and those guys were, Stallings and Stubbs were looking good in this long television match. So this was going to be a very good match. The TV match, I watched it. I was like, wow, this could have been on any show in America, this match, in a house show. So the type of TV match, that type was perfect, man. It filled a lot of time, it had a lot of action, and it had the studio really excited.
Good deal. All right, so how about the personality profile? Who was on that?
Well, I was. And the studio fans were glad to see me. When I came to the set after Charlie introduced me, and it had been a long time since I'd been live on Southeastern Gulf Coast TV show. I was on the show the week before, but it was a video, which isn't nearly effective as being on there live. And you sit right there next to those bleachers, and those fans are right on top of you. And Charlie and I watched the video from Mobile that was recorded 3 nights earlier of the match between myself and Ox Baker that ended up with both of us being disqualified. And it showed on the end a referee got hurt in that one, and he had to be carried back to the dressing room at the end of the match. So Charlie and I talked about Ox Baker and his despicable history, man, especially regarding my family and the relationship that we had with Ray Gunkel, who died after a match with Ox Baker in Savannah, Georgia, 7 years earlier. We discussed a little bit of that and how that went down, and then we discussed the upcoming no disqualification match. And wow, Charlie said, Ron, I'm really scared. I mean, this guy is not a normal opponent, and he has a hold that is known to be extremely dangerous.
Well, there's no one like Ox Baker. All right, so who followed that profile?
Well, Ox Baker. That had flown in that morning from Knoxville, where he was in the main event the night before that bounty match, where he did the interview with Gorgeous George Jr. So Ox did what he normally did, man, which was scare the heck out of everybody in the studio, for one thing, right? I mean, and he did it in a way where 2 or 3 times, several times in the course of his match, he just jumped right out in front of the people in the bleachers. And the fans, they were sitting on him. Some of them took off for the doors, right? I mean, Ox, he was an ugly, bad-looking son of a gun, right? And he was having a great time just scaring the heck out of it. So by the time he finished his match, half the bleachers were empty. People were standing out in the lobby waiting for him to get through and get out of there, right?
Yeah.
So, and he just, wow, he finally went back in the ring and he mercifully ended it for his opponent. And thankfully, he didn't hit him with a hard punch. Sure didn't want to see any of that.
So the fans weren't clamoring over him to touch him or get a picture made or anything? None of that, huh?
No, not hardly.
All right, Studs. So was it time for that match Charlie Platt told Austin Idol about earlier that he should watch at the end of the TV show?
Yeah, it sure was, Charlie. And and you'll like this one, man. So the ring announcer, he announced the guy's opponent. The guy had not been seen yet, right? And the announcer announced who his opponent was, and his opponent was already in the ring. And then all of a sudden, man, here comes this guy. He's dressed exactly, and then and his body looks exactly like the Gladiator. Since the Gladiator had been there for many months. Except he had a different mask when he got in the ring. He had the same outfit. He had the same body type, but he had a different mask on, and it was a white mask, and it had a name embroidered across the forehead of the match said Mr. Pensacola. So everybody in the studio and at home, they knew exactly who it was, right? Here was the Gladiator, Dick Steinborn, but he's got on another mask and a different name. So the studio crowd exploded. They were like, wow, Steinborn is still here, man. This is good. Well, Austin Idol didn't like it. I mean, so he had gone back after his first match and showered, and he put himself on a suit. And he had a suit and everything. And he came screaming out of the dressing room, went straight to the set, and Mr. Pensacola, he tore into his opponent, and they rang the bell, and the match got started, and Idol was screaming at Charlie. He goes, "That's the Gladiator. That's the Gladiator." And it was so loud that you could have heard him in downtown Dothan. You knew how far that is from the studio. I mean, he was just, stop this match. And he got so embroiled and so angry, he just couldn't help himself. He charged up to the ring. Just about the time Mr. Pensacola put the sleeper hold on the guy he was wrestling, Idol charged the ring. And when Idol jumped up on the apron, Mr. Pensacola just dropped his sleeper hold, and he turned around, grabbed Idol by the back of his suit pants, and flipped him over into the ring. and he put the sleeper on him. so the studio exploded this way. And now Mr. Pensacola's got Idol in a sleeper. And and I'm sure the thousands and thousands, I think about it every time I see one of these, what people at home were doing, watching this, like, wow, this is great. So Mr. Pensacola put Idol to sleep. He just laid him out in the middle of the ring, and he just left him there. He didn't wake him up. He just went to the dressing room. And it was a little bit of pause there. There was nobody there. Idol's laying there in his suit, and then he's out cold. And so here comes Ox Baker, and the two assassins came in, Eddie Mansfield and the Hunter, and they were, screaming for help. Hey, somebody help him. Hey, what, somebody get out here. So then they started trying to wake him up, and, everybody took a shot at it, and then finally, Ox Baker set him up on his butt, and he popped him with one that had big right hands in the back of the head, and the Idol came too. So, wow, the studio, they were still roaring. They were still into this.
So you're saying Ox Baker's big mitt on the back did the job, woke him up?
Yeah, he put a lot of guys to sleep with that. So I guess it's good for waking them up too.
That had to be one of the best TV shows in Southeastern history, no doubt, and I might have seen that show back in the day. I have one question, Stud. How was Don Curtis and Southeastern Wrestling going to get away with allowing the Gladiator to do this?
Well, David, he wasn't a gladiator. It was Mr. Pensacola.
Well, of course.
And he was going to be Mr. Pensacola until somebody took a mask off of him or proved it.
I should have known, Ron. You are probably right, though. I never saw an angle where anyone did anything exactly like that before. All right, so what happened Wednesday night, September 26th of 79 in Mobile, Alabama's Expo Hall?
Well, Roy Lee Welch, he beat the Inferno. Vince Violati lost to Eddie Mansfield. Kevin Sullivan got another win over the Hunter. Me and Ox Baker, we had a bloody match. It was kind of reminiscent, I guess, of the matches Baker was having with our big boy, that went to Minnesota. It was a bloody contest, man, and it went to a no decision. We fought all over the building, man, not just that building in Mobile, but in Montgomery and in Dothan as well. And we were going to be coming back the next week and in Texas Death Match in all three of the major cities. Then Austin Idol, he left the ring, man, a bloody mess in his match with Mr. Pensacola. Went back to the dressing room and was counted out. Obviously, Mr. Pensacola got his hand raised, but he couldn't win the belt because Idol had left the ring and was counted out. So then the Assassins, they regained the Southeastern Tag Belts. They won 2 out of the 3 falls in that Tag Team Championship 2 out of 3 fall match against Stubbs and Stallings. And they were going to be returning against Stubbs and Stallings for the last time. And the next week, when they were going to wrestle in a match in which the team that lost had to split up forever.
Wow. I thought the Knoxville matches in TV were really good, but now, after hearing what happened down south, I think it may have been even better than Knoxville. So I guess the real test is the attendances. So what was it like in those 3 major markets in South Alabama?
Well, they were all up again, Dave. Montgomery went up from 2,800 to over 3,000 to 3,100. Mobile went from 3,800 to over 4,000 at 4,200. Dothan was up from 3,300 to 3,600. All 3 cities combined were up an additional 1,000 fans from the week before, and that was 1,000 more than the week before that. So, things are starting to go better, starting to improve down there in the Gulf Coast. And to me, Dave, the most telling figure was Knoxville. If you look back, Knoxville had 3,700 compared to Mobile and Expo Hall with a full house of 4,200. And maybe even more telling, then this figure in comparison between Knoxville and Mobile is a comparison between Knoxville's crowd and Knoxville had a population of 150,000 people during that time frame.
Right.
They had 3,700 in the Coliseum. Dothan had a population of less than 70,000.
Yep.
Dothan had 3,600. Only 100 fans less than Knoxville and less than half the size.
Wow.
So in this week, the Gulf Coast territory, it had really impressed me.
That last figure, the 3,600 from Dothan, Alabama, of course, compared to Knoxville's 3,700, really, that's mind-blowing, especially when you compared the population of those two cities at that time. So I'm sorry, but we're out of time today, Stud. I just don't think we're going to make that learning tree question.
Well, one last comparison, Dave, before we go today. The Knoxville steady 5,000 plus crowds that we had been having up until the war started, beginning of 79 up until June of 1979. We were steadily doing 5,000 and more for each one of those Coliseum shows. Wow. So this Knoxville steady 5,000 crowd had disappeared. And the war started in June. 4 months, we're 4 months later. Basically, those 5,000 crowds had gone because of the war. And that was the only reason that they had dropped off. And as a businessman, when I started to realize what had happened in the last 4 months, it made me wonder what might happen to the attendances in the next 4 months.
I have to say, the last thought of yours brings me closer to where I think your head was in 1979. You had to be thinking at this point, something's got to change. So this has been another groundbreaking Studcast, obviously. A one-of-a-kind ride so full of history and information that it's probably only available right here since you actually lived it every day. So how about next week, Stud? How do you top it? Where do we ride next week?
Well, Southeastern Gulf Coast was basically at this point pushing the Tennessee territory, actually beating the Tennessee territory. As we entered the month of October, 1979, we'll be doing that next week. We'll be into October with a tremendous card in Southeastern. And we got to have a loser leaves the territory match. We're going to have a loser tag team having to split forever. We're going to be a Texas death match between me and Ox Baker. So we'll also talk about the TV down there, the results and the attendances. And then when we get back to the Tennessee territory, we'll still be cranking out some good cards. Another bounty match was going to be there. We're going to have the former NWA world champion, Jack Brisco, come to Knoxville to challenge Dick Slater for the Southeastern Championship. We'll have a United States Junior Championship match, one of the most unusual matches in history on that Tennessee card. We're going to have what we called a 30-30 match. It's going to be between Robert and Jimmy. And if the rules were, if Jimmy didn't win in the first 30 minutes, the second 30 minutes of the match, it's going to switch over, to a regular match, to a Texas death match in the last 30 minutes. So also we'll talk there about the TV results, the attendances, and plus another all-star card. And wow, man, I'll do my best. I promise next week to try to get us to a learning tree question too.
Yeah, I hope we make that. That's always so much information coming out of that. Hey, folks on Facebook, you know the deal. Go to Ron Fuller Welch, the Tennessee Stud, on Facebook. Like him, follow him there. Become friends with a living legend. Same thing on Twitter. Find Ron on Twitter. Same thing. Ron Fuller Welch on Twitter. Follow him there too. Check out his fantastic website, tnstud.com. tnstud.com. It seems like everything kind of rotates around in Ron's world right there at tnstud.com. This Studcast is going to be there, and every Studcast ever done, this is number 317, they're all there, plus 43 Super Studcast. And Ron's Stud Store, you can find all kinds of souvenirs, including Ron's thrilling lion novel called Brutus. You can get yours personally autographed. You can get it there at tnstud.com. Go to YouTube, Southeastern Rewind now. Subscribe. Get the best in old school wrestling on YouTube. In the search bar, put in Southeastern Rewind. It pops up immediately. Find 338 videos. The last 94 Studcast, 52 stud stories, 68 short rides with the stud. Don't forget Ron's Ask the Stud #9 question and answer show. It's there. It's now available. It has already set a record for a new one. That's YouTube, Southeastern Rewind, the best in old school wrestling. All right, Stud, another great one. Any final comments?
Well, I got to admit, Dave, I'm blown away, man, by the tremendous growth in Studcast listeners. I mean, fans have just started coming out of the woodwork, and people that for years maybe have not listened to Studcast. All of a sudden, it has become really, really popular, and I can't thank all of those fans out there enough, and especially those new fans, and for everybody's support. I appreciate everybody's support. Please take care of yourselves and others, and may God bless us all.
For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So fool Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.